Okay, now, I thought we were just, we paused it.
Well, remember, we had to kill that one. because
Okay,
this is the
that's
new link.
right.
Yeah, this
Okay,
is a brand new link for everybody. So,
okay, so I wanted them to see that
so
instead of,
is everybody coming into this link?
not, well, we got 20 people.
So it's whoever wants to come in.
Whoever wants to is coming into
Okay.
this.
Yeah, so this is, because this is a fresh link for everybody.
Okay,
And we moved, like Janet moved over. And I mean, in the future, if you want to keep the same link, we
in the
can.
future, we're gonna keep the same one because I am concerned that we'll lose some of them.
Okay, yeah, we can just pause it and then pick, but that's fine. We'll just do that. We'll just call it
I
information.
mean, we sent
Anyway,
them the link ahead of time, but
Sure,
sometimes it's easy to lose that when you get lots of emails.
absolutely. Yeah. That's fine. We'll do one link next time.
Yep. All right, let's,
Thank you. Because
Thank you.
Gwen, you can hear us, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Joelle sent you her information.
okay, it's,
So you can-
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Mhm.
okay, it's not advancing.
Oh, let's see.
It's not doing it there.
All right.
It's, yeah, see, it's not escaping either.
Oh, wait a minute, this is,
The old one.
here. I gotta share the Zoom first.
Okay,
So share. So you can do this or this. It's up to you. If
okay.
you're gonna stand here, you
I'm
can
gonna
use that.
stand here. I'll use this.
So you should be good, yeah.
Okay, let's get started. All right, I appreciate you're upstairs.
Well, actually, I've got it.
Okay, you're gonna, okay, I'll take care of it. All right, we are now in the writing workshop. And what we're gonna do today is talk to you about how to prepare your proposal. But before we do that, I'm gonna provide you with some additional details about the PhD program here. Then we're gonna talk about what scholarly research is. As I mentioned briefly in the initial session, we are interested in individuals who are intellectually curious. And our definition of intellectually curious is someone who's searching to learn new and different kinds of concepts, and that you would want to be interested in learning what we refer to as scholarly and ultimately theoretical kinds of research. So we're going to share with you what we mean by scholarly research, because we have a lot of emphasis, and we think it's important to share this with you early on, because that's what you're going to be doing in the program, but it's also what we're preparing for you to do after you graduate with a degree from not only our PhD program, but from any PhD program. I'm going to give you some specific suggestions on how to complete the writing assignment. As I mentioned earlier, we believe, and I've learned from doing this since 2009, which is when I first became involved in non-traditional programs. I believed and tested that this is an effective selection tool. And so we've continued to use it and had a great deal of success with it. And then if there are any additional questions at the end of the session, then I'll try to answer them to the extent that I can. So we didn't really, introduce you, but Gwen Pennywell has been there. You may have seen her picture. She's the Metro College of Business Director of Graduate Studies, and we depend on Gwen very much because, well, for me, I don't like the paperwork, and so I know I can always depend on Gwen to help me complete those processes and to get my paperwork processed. Maybe Gwen, you might say a couple of words.
Hi, everybody. I've been in the background really quiet and hopefully everything works well. You never know I'm here. My position is I am the assistant dean of the graduate school. So I do assist Joe from a paperwork standpoint. Now I'm also a faculty member. I teach in the finance program for the MBA and undergrad, but I do not teach in the PhD program. But I am the go-to person as you're trying to get your paperwork in. If you're doing your application process and something doesn't make sense to you, I want to know more about, well, how do you get into the system? What's missing? If you've requested your transcripts and they've not shown up, you can contact me for that type of information. If it is the paper-related questions, they definitely go to Joe. Any administrative type questions would go to me. If you're an international student and you have questions about ESL and international questions, I can help direct you to the correct office.
So let me comment.
That's what I do. Yes.
Yeah, let me comment and say, I didn't mean to give you the impression that Gwen is all about paperwork. That's just what I depend upon her for. She's an excellent scholar. She's in the field of finance and she does serve on committees. So if individuals choose a topic that needs some kind of knowledge or implications in the finance area, then Gwen will likely be on your committee. So Gwen, as I say, supports our program in a lot of ways that are very important, other than necessarily the scholarly kind of component, but also the scholarly kind. Mickey Smith is not with us. He's on a family outing today, but you'll meet him, particularly if you are involved in the management concentration. You've met Bill Gillis. And if you're in management, you'll be Gillis, as Pam pointed out. And Armando, you've met our new coordinator in business analytics. So we have a number of other faculty that are involved, and we also have outside global scholars. So we have what we believe is an excellent team in terms of covering all the areas of interest. We haven't mentioned it, but I can tell you that many of our graduates pursue academic positions afterwards. Most of them choose to go to regional state universities or similar kinds of opportunities, but some have moved to other kinds of institutions. Some of them become consultants. Some of them also choose to hang out a shingle and work in a specific area. We have a couple of graduates who have stayed with our university. So there are lots of different opportunities and flexibility once you earn your PhD. As I pointed out earlier, our program it's a 3-year program, or it's targeted to be a 3-year program. About 40% of our students do in fact graduate at the end of 3 years. One of the reasons that the others don't graduate in 3 years, for the most part, is that in order to graduate in 3 years, you have to actually be finished by March 1st of the 3rd year. Why do you have to be finished by March 1st? Because you have to then submit your completed doctoral dissertation to the graduate school, and the graduate school has to process it mostly in terms of making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and the format's correct and so forth, so that when it gets posted online, it represents our program and it represents your research very well. It's a weekend PhD. You meet the first 2 years, nine weekends per year. We currently do not have classes in December. We don't have classes in February, and we don't have classes in, what's the other one? Anyway, December, February, and September, the 3rd month. So you are participating in this program and would be admitted, should you be admitted, into cohort 10. That particular program begins generally the 2nd or the 3rd week in May. So you'll have May, June, and July coursework. We will provide to you advance indication of the weekends that will go at least a year, often a year and a half ahead, so that you can plan. Plan not only in terms of getting release from your work, but also in terms of purchasing your tickets if you're flying ahead to get the least expensive options. I think Terrence mentioned that in cohort 10, we have people from Washington, Oregon, California, but we've had them from many other states. We tend to draw people not only from the general area, but an extended one, I think mostly because we are one of the longest programs to have been in existence that's non-traditional. And we hope it's also because we built a high quality program. In fact, one of the surprising things is that in cohort 10, there is only one local individual from the Mobile area. They're all from non-local areas. We added the business analytics concentration this past year. We are very pleased with it. There's a lot of interest in that program. A long-term goal might be, and I should say goal, but a long-term option might be to create a separate concentration entirely for management and marketing, but we are choosing not to do that in the early years because it's a new program and we want to grow it slowly so that we can ensure the quality of the program. From the beginning of this program in around 2012, it was initially a management concentration and then we added marketing my first year here in 2016. But within those three areas of concentration, you can emphasize other areas, whether it's entrepreneurship or family business or whatever. We like to enable students to customize to the extent possible, but yet at the same time enable them to be qualified to be accepted into, if they choose to transition into academics, to accepted into a traditional management department or a marketing department that would enable them to pursue an academic career. Why should you come here? Well, you know, I'm a humble person, you would find that out, but I would tell you that we have a world-class faculty. If you check us out, as many students do, you can look on the website of the College of Business. You'll see that all of the faculty participating in the program are excellent scholars. In particular, we have minimum requirements about having recent publication experiences in the field of interest. I would encourage you, if you're checking out other programs, that you drill down and look at the background and experience of the faculty who are actually teaching in the program, not just the faculty who are listed as working for that university. You want to know who you're going to be supported by in the classes that you're taking. So make sure that you check out who's actually teaching and who will be leading you towards your success in your doctoral program. It is what we call a research doctorate, and it's accredited by AACSB. It's also accredited by regional associations such as the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, but it's also supported by other regional associations. So it's quite well recognized, and along with our faculty, we feel like we are delivering a high quality program, even though we're a relatively smaller school in the South. We established the non-traditional program, but it's been recognized globally. What do we mean by that? Well, we've created a lot of visibility outside, not only in terms of attracting individuals who are not in the US, but also in terms of including some faculty who are international scholars from Germany and Portugal and so forth to participate in the program. Also, finally, it's the only doctoral program that's offered by the Mitchell College of Business. And you might be saying, well, you know, why is that important? Well, in a number of programs, particularly some traditional programs, you'll find that they have more than one doctoral program. And then there ends up often being competition between those programs and where the resources go. We have a single program, and all the resources that are dedicated to the doctoral program go into our program to ensure that we have the resources that we need and the access to the faculty that have the time and the commitment to deliver to you a high quality PhD degree. A research doctorate. I mentioned that earlier. What is a research doctorate? Well, probably most important is it's theory driven. It's theory driven. Some of you may have felt like in the past that theory is something that, you know, is kind of weird and difficult and in industry not necessarily needed, but realistically theory is something we apply every day. So if you're driving down the interstate and you're thinking about your speed, if you're going fast, I spent 10 years in Atlanta and having moved there when I had been living in Louisiana, I had to get used to the interstates and people were always driving 80 miles an hour and I got almost blown off the road if I was going the speed limit of 70. But people are going 90. But if you think about theory and how it's applied in your everyday life, and you don't really think of it as being theory, if you're driving down the interstate and you're driving 80 miles an hour and you see someone, law enforcement, taking radar on the side of the road, what are you going to do? Well, if you're doing 80, you probably may slow down to 75, thinking, I don't want a ticket or I can't afford a ticket. You know, and so you will automatically, and without even thinking of it as being theory, you'll slow down. So that's an example of how theory helps us to make decisions. So we teach you the approach that theory is something that is actually helpful to us. When you pursued your MBA, if it was an MBA, and by the way, I get this question all the time, do you have to have an MBA to be accepted into our program? And the answer is no. In fact, we have a lot of people with an engineering background who come in and are successful. Is it helpful to have business courses and business background? Yes, but in fact, we accept and a lot of those individuals excel. So when you're in a master's program, what do you learn? You learn best practices that someone else has developed. If you contrast that with a PhD program, what we help you to do is perhaps even develop some of your own best practices that you might apply. So theory is a means of exploring ideas and issues and testing those, ultimately improving your ability to explain why some of those problems evolved that you've been exposed to in your business experience, and ultimately to predict alternative outcomes that are possible for being able to solve those problems. So theory helps us to understand, to explain, and to predict outcomes and make better decisions. And there are literally hundreds of theories out there. But what we do is we share with you knowledge about specific theories that are the popular ones, and as well as the not so popular ones. But we focus on how you can apply those theories and apply them in a good way to move beyond traditional kinds of practices, which are not bad, but to expand upon those practices so that the new practices and the application of theory is more relevant for what's happening in the world today. So part of the process of testing and explaining theory is to identify and propose hypotheses that you can test and ultimately collect data and confirm that. Generally, students use two kinds of data. One of those is data generated through surveys. Probably in the past, I would say in the past, 100% of the students did survey work, but with the emergence of big data and data analytics, what we're seeing now is a transition away from survey research a little bit to use of secondary data. So there are lots of databases out there In the last few years, probably about 15 to 20% of the dissertations that people pursue and the projects that they work on involve the emerging secondary data, not only in terms of databases, but some of the people in marketing, they work with social media and other kinds of online sources of information. So you'll be working with two kinds, broadly speaking, of information. One of those is information that you generate on your own through surveys. The second is information that's increasingly available through secondary sources. We do have access to Bloomberg terminals here, and we also pay a licensing fee to Capital IQ and a number of other secondary sources. Particularly, one of the students I worked with this past year who graduated in a combination of accounting and information systems within the concentration of management, worked on and published a dissertation that was on the topic of cybersecurity breaches and how that influences stock prices. So that's an example of how a student who was pursuing a management concentration, but had an interest in accounting and actually was a CPA, but also was interested in information systems, how he could adapt the management concentration in his doctoral research to pursue something that enabled him to, he now works for Mercer University in Atlanta, but he's continuing to consult on the side because of his interest in information sciences or information systems kind of research. So when you do your doctoral research, by the way, what you're going to do is to identify one or sometimes a couple of theories. You define and explain the theory, and then you apply that theory to help you improve your decision making. One of the criteria for the dissertation research is that you must make a unique contribution. And probably every student asked me multiple times, what is a unique contribution? Well, a unique contribution is something that looks at and pursues and ultimately explores something that is somewhat different than the past. So you might take a theory and extend that theory to a different dependent variable or a different outcome variable, or you might test it in a family business environment versus a non-family business environment, and so forth. And then you have to combine that dissertation research to improve and build your analytical skills. Now, what you need to understand is that you do not have to solve equations in our program. You learn your analytical skills and you build upon the software that's available. And there's lots of software available. So everyone in a PhD, it doesn't matter whether you're in a non-traditional one or ours or some other one, you're going to have to develop your analytical skills. The business analytics program emphasizes analytics more so than the other areas, but in terms of our curriculum, approximately 50% of the coursework you take will in fact involve analytics. The other half will be in your area of concentration, whether it's management or marketing or business analytics or some subcomponent of those three areas of concentration. Most of the students who go through our program, they have the experience, but they're looking for some other kind of transition or option, perhaps to enhance their current situation that's more stimulating. What does a mid-career transition mean? Well, some people find that they're in a position where after 20 years they can retire from one company, but not retire from life or from their profession. So they're looking for new skills and capabilities that are not available to them with the existing degrees and training that they have. The typical master's degree program, and I've obviously viewed the statistics in business more so than other areas, but the typical master's degree becomes obsolete in 5 years. That's on the assumption that you don't keep up, but still it's difficult to keep up with what's happening in business and business disciplines unless you have some kind of structured framework. So one of the reasons to examine and pursue a PhD is that, you know, when you become obsolete, then you're not of value to your current employer, and you need to brush up skills you already have, but also to add entirely new skills. So as part of your program, whether you're in business analytics or not, as Hermano mentioned earlier, even some of the non-business analytics people will be exposed on a limited basis to statistical analysis and visualization programs like the Python and other similar kinds of ways to represent the findings of your research and to communicate them to your audience. So a PhD will enhance your position, but it'll also give you additional career opportunities above and beyond. Some of those career opportunities will be for a full-time entire transition out of what you've been doing for the last 15 or 20 years. Others will be on an adjunct basis. So you will have additional flexibilities and opportunities from the PhD, and also a good deal of personal satisfaction about achieving goals that many of the people who are interested in pursuing a PhD have never been able to pursue in the past. So what's an example of a dissertation? Well, this is one that I worked on that reflects a current phenomenon, not just in the US, but really in virtually every country in the world. The populations, with the exception of some of the let's say, the countries in the Pan-Pacific region, they're aging. So particularly in Europe and Australia and the US, you have an aging workforce. And so the phenomenon that's emerged is the older worker with a younger supervisor. And for those of us that are older, sometimes it's an adjustment to say, wow, I'm in my 50s or 60s, or I'm in my 70s, but you know, I'm working for someone who's 30 or 40 or whatever. How do I feel about that? Traditionally, we thought that individuals, or we believed that individuals who had more years of experience were the better decision makers. But increasingly, what we're finding out is that younger individuals who are trained in the latest developments in business perhaps have equal skills that can help us. So the phenomenon that this individual wanted to study is what's the impact of an older worker who is working or answering to a younger supervisor or manager. And if you look at this, we've got a theoretical model that starts out with, how do your expectations differ if you're an older worker with a younger supervisor versus an older worker with an older supervisor, or maybe a supervisor of your own age? So what are your expectations? Do those expectations influence what you believe the manager is doing and how they're performing? And ultimately, how does that influence outcomes like your commitment to the organization, or maybe your performance, or maybe even a decision as to whether you might search for a new job? So when you're looking at a framework like this, there is theory associated with it. And some of the things you have to resolve in order to pursue this kind of research is how do you define some of these concepts? How do you define an older worker versus a younger worker? So for example, in this particular case, we looked at ranges from an older worker being defined with a chronological age, perhaps of 50 or 55 or 60. And we came up with a framework using some existing research in the government, and we chose 50. So we defined older workers as being 50 and above. Sorry, I don't want to, create any issues out there, but that was the definition of our research. You might choose to use something else. But then once we got this definition, the question is a 50-year-old worker actually going to perceive a 49-year-old supervisor as being a younger one. And our research led us to the idea that to make comparisons of older workers and their perceptions with what was perceived as a younger supervisor, that we said there needed to be a 10-year period in there. So you want to examine something that will have enough differences to actually manifest some kind of impact. And so if I'm 50 years old, likely a 10-year period would lead me to perceive this person as being younger as opposed to a 1 or 2 year difference. So you got to be able to define your concepts. Secondly, you got to be able to measure them with what we call constructs. Well, what are constructs? Well, when you in fact are researching ideas like expectations of managers, commitment to the organization, trust, and so forth, to try to measure those concepts with a single question is virtually impossible. It simply would not be valid. So the result is when we're measuring aspects like that, including things like job satisfaction or even customer satisfaction, you measure those concepts with multiple questions and then you aggregate or combine them. But you have to be able to decide how can you develop or identify those multiple questions to measure things like expectations and performance and commitment and trust and job satisfaction and so forth. And then finally, once you come up with a theoretical model like this to test, then you've got to decide, well, who are you going to talk to get your information and how are you going to access them? One of the things that we provide as part of our program is we have membership to a company called Qualtrics. And Qualtrics has not only online capability for individuals to respond to questionnaires online, but they have panels of individuals who represent different groups that you might be interested in. So for example, I recently completed a study where we wanted to get information from management individuals within family businesses of a certain minimum size. And they were able to provide that information, and ultimately the individual collected the data and graduated. So this is one example of a dissertation, but there are literally, hundreds of different examples that are possibilities. And in your third year of the program, that's where you get to customize the program and apply it to something that is in fact unique and of particular interest to you. And as I mentioned earlier, individuals in our program are able to do that quicker and easier than individuals who have almost no experience in business. So what's the typical time? Well, 3.6 years. At least it was that way when I calculated it. It maybe by now be 3.5 or 3.4. It ranges around that level. But at the same time, and I know you're all concerned about this, there are things that are obstacles in the pathway, and everybody doesn't graduate in 3 years, but Pam Whitehead, who is with us, she graduated in 4, but like a lot of people, you have career and family changes, and those things sometimes delay you. But in terms of the obstacles, one, identifying a research topic. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, the people who come in and join our program have ideas, but we have to work with them to define those ideas so that they are realistic and meaningful and can be completed in a 1 year time frame, or maybe a little bit more, but close to a 1 year time frame. Data collection. You think about data collection, many of the individuals who come into our program have contacts and think that those contacts with organizations will help them. It does actually happen occasionally, but you have to anticipate that potential problems could arise. What are some of those problems? Well, their contact may take a job with a different company by the time they get to the point of collecting the data. Or maybe the manager says, yes, that's an interesting project. We want to work with you on it. Let's do it. And by the time it gets to the legal department says, no way are we going to do that with these people. We aren't going to let our employees to respond to it. So running into issues and problems like that sometimes delays individuals. We attempt to train you on data analytics and data analysis and the statistical techniques. And what I would say is all people succeed in executing the analysis, but statistics is like a lot of other topics. Some people enjoy it more so than they thought they would, but on the bottom line, more so than others. So it's a normal distribution. Everyone does execute sophisticated types of analysis because this is a PhD program, but it can be a little bit of a hurdle. So that's a potential obstacle, but we have the resources to help you to do that. And then finally, writing the dissertation, sitting down and writing it can be an obstacle. When you go through a program like our program, really any PhD, you're going to write a bunch of papers. Every course that is in your concentration will require a minimum of 1, maybe 2 papers. Those papers will be very similar to the research proposal that you have to prepare to be successful in being admitted to our program. We teach you how to do that, but we also have to support you. What I would say is the most important aspect of writing and completing the dissertation is to work a little bit every day, or if you miss a day, which is okay, then say the next day I'm going to get back. And so if I write a paragraph today, that's a paragraph I don't have to write tomorrow or the next day. And if you don't write that paragraph today, when you get to the next day, write 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs, but keep at it. Because if you stop writing and you stop working on your dissertation for a month, it'll take you a week or more to get back up to speed. So be consistent in terms of working on that dissertation. And to the extent that we can, we have designed the program and we support the program to help you to address these kinds of obstacles or challenges. What we can't do is we can't change the fact that your career may change. We have individuals who change jobs. We have family changes. We all are familiar with what that is, from illness to other kinds of relationship challenges. So we can't help you with that other than try to, calm you down or whatever. But those are things that you have to deal with individually to the extent that you can. About 4 years, we do graduate about 81% of the people. I've been here 5 years now. This is my 6th year. And of the people that I've worked with, I didn't count this ahead of time, I must admit, but I only know of 3 people that have not completed their program. And one of them, unfortunately, had a serious automobile accident. So that has delayed them, but issues like that prevent them. I hope it will become 100%, but that is always a concern with a program like this because in 3 to 4 years, life happens. Back to the idea of what scholarly research is. What in our terminology is the creation of verifiable knowledge. Not just guesswork, not just judgment. Judgment's fine. We all make judgments every day. We all believe in our experiences and knowledge, and it is helpful. But in scholarly research, we actually collect data to support it and collect data to ensure that if something we thought was true in the past, has it in fact changed? And the example I've got here is obviously this is a long time ago, but A long time ago, people thought the world was flat, and now we know it's round, and we can verify that it's round because we have satellites and so forth. You can fly up and if you have a lot of money, which not many of us have, you can pay $500,000 and get Jeff Bezos to take you up and to see the world as round yourself. But we have some adjectives that we use to define scholarly research. And one of those adjectives is empirical. Empirical means we actually collect data. We collect data that enables us to test our hypothesis. Replicable, it means that if we conduct a piece of research or a topic, research on a particular topic, that someone can come along and say, that's an interesting idea. I'd like to see if in fact that would be true in a different circumstance. If it's tested in the US, will it work in Germany? And probably more important is not will it work in Germany because we're both developed countries, but will it work in South America or will it work in Africa? So replicable means the process, can the process be repeated and tested and explored further? Analytical means you drill down to it and analyze it and ultimately apply data again as we do in empirical research. It has to be theory driven. You must, at the doctoral level, you must test theory. Theory is, for example, are there challenges or issues for individuals who are thrust in a situation where they have an older supervisor? Does that influence their motivation, their satisfaction, and so forth? So you would apply theory. There is a theory that a lot of students apply called trust commitment. Does trust in your organization lead to commitment and ultimately to higher performance within the workplace? Got to be logical, logical in terms of consistent with the theory. And finally, it's got to be rigorous. So these adjectives, these 6 adjectives are characteristics of scholarly research. And in order to be considered scholarly research, it means that all of those characteristics in some way can be identified with the process and the outcome that you choose to explore in your individual research. So this is a process. In this particular process, what we've got is 7 steps. Some individuals divide it into 6 steps, some divide it into 8 steps. So it's not the number of steps you have, because in essence, the scholarly research process is quite similar. It's just that some people organize it into 5 steps or 6 steps, whereas others have more. So it starts out with the idea of identifying and defining a research problem. Individuals who apply to our program and those who are successful don't have any problems identifying this. Individuals without work experience tend to have problems. So you identify and define your research problem. You select a theory based upon for the most part, historical perspectives in the literature. You develop a conceptual model, and that is your writing assignment or your research proposal. In other words, in this particular framework, your research proposal will execute the first 3 steps. As far as data collection, we also ask you to consider the issue of data collection. A topic of interest to a lot of academics in the last few years is fraud. Well, if you propose that you want to learn something about fraud, then you can't just go out and ask people, have you committed fraud? So they're obviously not going to answer the question, at least accurately. So we ask you in that research proposal to at least think about the fact, can you actually find the data to answer the question? But we will teach you about research design. We'll teach you about data collection. In particular, 50% of the program will teach you about data analysis, and ultimately we'll teach you about findings. But the research proposal is emphasizing the first 3 steps that are identified in red font, whereas the other areas are limited expectations on that research proposal. How do we define the problem? Well, most people might think of problems just automatically as there's something wrong. Well, lots of problems are we're doing good today, but we want to be doing good tomorrow, or we want to improve upon a current situation because we know there are competitors in the marketplace out there. And those competitors are thinking about the same kinds of issues. So if you are thinking about a problem as being only something is wrong, no. The problem could be, how do we get from where we are today to ensure that we're in business in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years is a long time, but anyway, we're looking at gaps between where we are and where we would like to be. Okay, so this is how you identify a problem. How can you improve your company performance? How can you improve your employees' performance? Those are issues that are relevant for a business PhD, and we would expect you to use your mind and to process and come up with an idea. Here's some other examples of problems. Brand equity. You probably, even if you're not in marketing, know what brand equity is. How do you improve your brand equity? How do you become an Apple? I was going to say, how do you become a Facebook? But with recent publicity about Facebook, maybe you don't want to become like Facebook. But brand equity is what your market thinks about you, and we think about it in terms of our PhD. We're constantly talking about, where is our brand equity today? How can we improve the brand equity of our Mitchell College of Business PhD program? And by the way, we don't even limit it to the PhD. We think, what about our Mitchell College of Business master's program? And we're in the process. We developed the business analytics PhD first. I like to take credit for that because I wanted to be a first mover in that space. In my career, I'm always interested in being the first mover because you get your market share and then you have to maintain it as opposed to fight to get to a prominent position after someone else has already grabbed the publicity. But we are now working on a master's degree in business analytics. It will be not an MBA concentration, but an entire master's degree with a concentration in business analytics. But we think about that as enhancing our master's level business programs. But we also think about the brand equity of our undergraduate program. So it's a concept that I think all of you can relate to, even if you are not in marketing. Well, if you're in industry and if you're a manager, you probably are thinking about training programs. And so a topic that you might explore is how to improve training programs. What kinds of programs do you need to develop to ensure that your employees have the skills they need? Or maybe even in terms of those of you who are thinking about this degree, as all of you people are, what kind of training program do you need to pursue in order to continue to be current and competitive in the marketplace, not just today, but next year and the year after and so forth. A third area might be, how do we communicate with customers these days? Well, social media, websites, Twitter. Well, 10 years ago, we didn't even talk about that very much. We were all about, well, what TV ad said this, or what radio commercial or outdoor signs. Do those traditional media still have a role? Yes, but what are your customers? Who are your customers? Which of these media can be most successful in terms of getting an accurate and a meaningful message to your customers? How can business analytics improve your ability to make better decisions? How can you educate your employees to use the business tools and the analytical tools that will help them to make the best decisions? For those of you in management, how can we improve the teams that we work together? In your cohort program here, we usually have teams as well. Within the new business analytics program, the 9 people have 3 sub-teams of 3H. 3 each in each group. Does that mean they don't talk to the others? No, but they have individual teams and then they have teams as a whole. And we try to help them to improve their outcomes here, which is being successful in our program. And then finally, just a last example, leadership style. Leadership is changing a lot in the last few years, and you have to match the best leadership style for the work environment that you're functioning in. So these are all examples of typical business problems that our students have explored in the past, and that I'm sure that some will continue to be pursuing in the future. I don't know how that happened, but let's see if I can get back to the right one. I pushed that button and it went multiple. All right, so let's go back to what the research proposal involves. First off, you need to understand the concept of variables and the fact that there are multiple kinds of variables. We're going to keep this simple, but what is a variable? Well, you have to be able to measure things. If you're going to look at and actually test relationships between variables, you must be able to measure it. And within the framework of a PhD, measurement means to assign numbers so that you can calculate means and medians and correlations and ultimately apply predictive methods. So a variable is a measure of something that you can observe, and it could be, as we've identified here, job performance, job satisfaction, trust, commitment, profit, market share, so forth and so on, reputation. All of those are concepts that could be a variable. Some of those are multiple item concepts, and some of them are single. But they are all possible variables that you would think of as being able and wanting to measure within a business framework. We divide these types of variables into 2 categories. A dependent variable that we also refer to as an outcome that you hope to explain or to predict. As you move through the program, you'll probably start out looking at a single dependent variable, such as performance. But in academics and in scholarly research, you often have 2 or 3 or 4 outcome variables that you look at. But you want to be able to explain and predict these outcomes. And in order to do that and improve your ability to do that, you need what we call independent variables. Independent variables are other concepts that help you to explain or predict a particular outcome and also improve your ability to predict. So if you're thinking about predicting with a 30% accuracy, how do you develop a theoretical model and test it and move from 30% to 40% to 50%? You do that by identifying relevant independent variables that might influence or help you to explain your single or, as you get more complex, your multiple dependent variables, and to be able to decide whether the independent variables affects that outcome positively or negative. Does it help you to increase the trust or improve the performance, or does it result in lower performance? And those are issues that you clearly need to understand. So our problems that we deal with at the PhD level involve relationships between independent and dependent variables, and you'll need to right away be familiar with and think of these terms, because you'll need to develop a theoretical model and include that in your research proposal. So let's think about some specific examples. There is a theory called Stakeholder Theory that is relevant for organizations. And what Stakeholder Theory says is that there are various subgroups that your organization needs to think about, because they are identified as independent variables, or we often refer to them as antecedents concepts that precede or come before or lead to a different level of performance. So the theory historically focused mostly on your customers and your competitors and what they're doing. But in the last 10 years, stakeholder theory has been extended from only customers and competitors to employees as stakeholders and shareholders. In some situations, if you're a local company, you're going to be thinking about the community that you're in business or you're functioning in. So stakeholder theory is exploring how you can optimize your relationship with your customers, which one of these stakeholders are relatively more important, which are less important. None of them are not important. They're all important, but they are prioritized from one circumstance to another. And how do they lead to performance? So this is a theoretical model. It has 4 independent variables represented by these 4 stakeholders and a single dependent variable. Here's another example, a theoretical model. We're talking about implementation of technology within your organization. Technology implementation is obviously very important because it's changing so rapidly, and ultimately, in this particular case, it influences productivity. So what comes before? What are the independent variables of technology implementation? Well, I've identified only 2 here. There are obviously others, but within an organization, sometimes you have individuals who are very accepting. The climate that you work in is accepting of technology. And in other situations, you have, unfortunately, senior management who says, well, I've done it this way all my life and I'm successful. Why do I need to change? So the climate that is prevalent within the organization obviously is related to and influences the extent to which you implement technology to support your workforce within your organization. But another aspect that's important is what we call shared values. To what extent do the values that your employees have in terms of working together and supporting each other, if they do work together well and they support each other and they're motivated to learn new and different kinds of techniques, then those values also influence technology implementation. And realistically, if you wanted to complicate this a little bit, the shared values is going to influence your technology acceptance climate, but that makes for a more complicated theoretical model, which you will be exposed to in a PhD program. But I want to, try to pass the KISS test today, keep it simple and short, or what other adjective you apply to that other S in that traditional kind of saying. So what is your research paper? Well, obviously you have to select a research problem. So I would assume, as is typical of the last 12 years I've been doing this, it's not often a situation of identifying a problem. It's a situation of, I have these 4 or 5 things I'm interested in. Which one do I select? So you have to select the research problem. Then you have to explain why it's important and how it might make a contribution to knowledge. You probably will be able to answer just based on your current knowledge, the first 2. But the third one is the area that you'll need to explore further. And that's about, what do we know about the problem? Well, when you access the writing exercise and pay the $100 fee, we provide you with, not everything, obviously, we can't do that, but we provide you with a selection of the literature that we believe is relevant to a cross-section of problems. If there's something missing there, then you need to contact me or some other faculty member and say, I need a little help in this area, but you will have to summarize what's known about the problem. Once you get access, you will see that selection of papers talks about different theories and ideas and concepts. And what you would do is to, in fact, summarize that in your literature review and the research proposal. Probably half of the people who have access to this material that is protected by licensing will go beyond the initial articles that we provide them. Some people want to pursue a problem that we've not identified and we've not provided the literature for. Again, if you have something that is not necessarily included in the literature we provide you, you need to get that approved ahead of time. That approval process would be through me. But the third thing then is to summarize in your literature review, which, by the way, in your 16 to 18 page proposal is probably going to be 5 to 7 pages long, and it could be a little longer. I would say 5 is very short, but it's summarizing the articles that we provide you, maybe some that you are already aware of, and summarizing it in a way that helps you to further define the problem and to provide examples of what others have learned about this concept in the past. Once you begin to write about that, you most likely will want to revise and refine and maybe explore the problem that you started with a little bit to make sure that your focus is really on target. You also will need to identify some possible independent and dependent variables and structured in terms of hypotheses, and ultimately develop a conceptual model like I've shared with you. By the way, in addition to the articles, you're going to be given some chapters from textbooks that will help you to understand better how to define the problem, to define it within the confines of a scholarly approach, and also to define for you what hypotheses are, and particularly conceptual models and how to draw them. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, we want you to reflect a little bit. I would say no more than a couple of paragraphs. So this is the kind of data that I want, and here's why I think that I can actually get access to that data. As I mentioned earlier, that data might be survey data, but it also might be secondary data. By the way, I would say 95 or higher percentage of the people have chosen a topic that is based on executing quantitative research. I have had a couple of students in the last 15 years or so who have pursued ideas that are qualitative. We don't discourage you, but a lot of times people choose qualitative kinds of topics, at least initially, because they think, oh, I'll never be able to do data analysis. But yes, you will. That's one of the primary pillars that we stand on in doctoral programs, is teaching people how to execute quantitative studies. You'll need to list your references, and you'll need to list them in a way that meets the standard format. Typically, that's American Psychological Association references, but you will see this in the articles that you read. And then finally, there's a list of things that you need to meet. And I'm going to be upfront with you right away. If when we reviewed proposals in the past, if they didn't meet the framework, you're going to get it sent back to you to say redo. And right away, it makes a not positive response if you haven't followed the requirements that we've set out in terms of that proposal. So I've already mentioned a good bit of this, but 16 to 18 pages in length. That doesn't include your cover page, your abstract, your tables and figures and references. The deadline for receipt of that is the 31st. In terms of completing this process, I highly recommend that you start early and that you write on it for maybe a month and you set it aside. You come back in 2 weeks or maybe even 3 weeks, and you reread it and you say, wow, I can do a lot better than what I did then. And so if you extend this over a couple of month period, the quality is going to be greater. Do some people complete it within a shorter period? Yes, they do. Are they successful? Well, some of them are, some of them are not. It's more difficult to do it in a short period of time. Generally speaking, I would say this in terms of admission, if you want to submit before that time, which is generally anytime in January, but there is a deadline, we will take a look at it, but we generally like to look at all the applicants and choose from the applicants a good cross-section of individuals that based on what they've submitted, will be not only qualified, but motivated to contribute to our class and ensure that we continue with the high quality of the program that we built up in the past. Paper is out, electronic is in, but save it frequently and keep a copy. It should be in Microsoft Word, Arial 12-point font. Maybe you use Calibri. Calibri's thin, it uses less ink, but late nights, it's more difficult to read. So that's why we require that you submit it in Word format. We also like Word format. If you want to submit PDF, that's fine, but if we have to make comments, then we can't make comments in the body. So keep a file, but we prefer Word so that we can type on that file that you submit us. Even if we don't send it back, if we've typed on it and we're prepared for the interview, which is the final part of the process, it helps us to make notes so that when we do interview you, that in fact, we've preserved our notes, because the number of applications that we have typically had in recent years ranges from 40 to 50, and we have to somehow screen that down to the smaller number, which ensures that we're able to maintain the quality. And then finally, don't send a hard copy. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over. I see that we have one question here.
Joe, real quick, and I'm going to post it in the chat. It looks like the slide says IDWILLIA, but Lisa's email address is LDWILLIA. So I'm going to put that in the chat just in case, because I would hate for someone to do all the hard work and we not receive it.
Okay, I see it. Looks, you're right. Let's change it right now, because I don't know how that happened, but clearly. And I can't change it on there, but it's Lisa, not L. I must have typed I, but LD Willa at southalabama.edu. And if you for some reason have problems, you also have my email address, and feel free to send it to me. But it helps if we have a single individual that can in fact coordinate all of these and organize it and set up the interviews, because in the final analysis, once you've completed everything, we do interview you. Historically, it was a personal interview. More recently with COVID, we've gone to virtual, but hopefully we'll be back to some personal interviews. What I would say is that if you're a long way away, if you're one of those individuals that's several hundred miles, or maybe even as close as Dallas or whatever, then we're glad to work with you. But there is a final interview there, sometimes a second interview. But we ultimately have to identify a smaller set of people from a larger number of applications. So let's go back and see what any questions might be. Yes, you can have the PowerPoint, and I think that will, I'm not sure that it's on the website, but I'm certainly glad to put it on the website. What you're going to find once you get access to that is you're going to find some excerpts from books, as I pointed out. You're going to find a set of articles that are for marketing applicants, a set of articles for management applicants, and a set of articles for business analytics. What I suggest that you do is you read those articles and begin to reflect upon ideas that you might have from your own work experience, and you come up with a research problem. Some people go ahead and pursue their research problem right away. Others of them, I get emails and they say, I'm thinking of doing this. and what do you think about it? And I'm glad to review them. I have a minor in management, and obviously I have a lot in business analytics. But if I can't comment on it, we need some specialized work, then obviously I would make sure that someone from another discipline and is maybe more qualified than am I, that they are in a position to get the kind of input that they need on preparing their proposal. What areas are talked about during the interviews? Well, mostly the interview is having individuals introduce themselves, talk about why they want to get a PhD. And then I would say at least half of it is talking about the research proposal and having them explain in more detail specific areas of why they chose that topic and their ideas on why it's a meaningful topic to be pursued. The assignment is not single space, it's double space. What is the out-of-state tuition? Well, out-of-state tuition and in-state tuition are both evolving concepts. Let me simply say that the cost for an in-state person over the 3 years, assuming you graduate in 3 years, is roughly $75,000, and the cost of out-of-state is roughly $95,000. So people often ask, how do I pay that? You pay it on a semester by semester basis. For those of you that are close by, Alabama has an agreement with the eastern counties of Mississippi and the western counties of Florida, so that we do give you in-state tuition. But if you need specific information, then we can talk about it. But that's generally the cost of the program. It goes toward a lot of things, including paying, the tuition, and it pays for the cost of the laptops and the software and the access to global scholars and the license fees, the database fees. There's lots of things that go into the program. One of the benefits, and someone asked this in the earlier session about competitive advantages. Most PhD programs these days are limited in terms of their budget. And so we try to spend the dollars, a portion of the tuition and fees that we charge, in investing them in two areas. One is to attract individuals that have skills that our faculty do not have, because we're not experts in every area. So for example, in the area of family business, we hire individuals who are directly involved in those kinds of research topics. But we also invest in our students so that they can be funded to go to conferences. And as I mentioned earlier, doctoral consortia to meet in other individuals and other kinds of programs. There is a minority program called the Ph.D. program, and that Ph.D. program provides for certain groups of individuals, it provides support counseling, and it provides some kinds of programs and so forth. We are members of the PhD program here, and we'll be glad to work with you to learn about it and perhaps participate in some of their programs. When will acceptance be officially informed? In general, what I would say is that we will start reading these proposals in January. We might read a few before January, but we're not going to make decisions in general too early, because we like to look at the entire scope and balance it out in terms of, we don't want 18 people in business analytics and 2 people in marketing. My field's marketing, but anyway, we believe strongly that you need a critical mass. You need other students to talk to. So if we took up all the slots by the popular area of business analytics, and you ended up in a program and you only had one person to talk to as a student, then that's not good. So what I would say is the bulk of those decisions are going to be made maybe as early as late January, but most of them are going to be made in February and in March. We also don't schedule interviews until after those proposals are in. So we try to make that decision as quickly as possible, because if you're accepted in March, that means you have to start classes in May, which is only 2 months later on. What I will say is by the time it reaches the end of February or so, you'll have an idea of whether you are still involved in the process. But you know, it's a complicated and not the kind of process that is merely spending 15 minutes to glance at a paper and decide whether it meets our criteria or not. I don't see any other questions. If there are some that arise, or if there's anyone out there, yes, I see a hand, but you want to go ahead and ask it if you want.
Hi, Dr. Hare. I think my question got lost as several of them popped up at the same time, but I've already received the list of articles and, you know, paid the fee. So I just wanted to clarify the articles. I have the list of the articles,
Yeah.
but I don't see any access to the articles. Are we on our own to access them however way we can?
Okay, well, those articles are supposed to be there and available. So if you look at that and click on the file, I'm not sure if you're looking.
You're right. I'm sorry. I just hadn't clicked on the file. I just printed
Hey,
off the list.
that's fine. You got to click on the file and those articles are provided to you.
Okay.
But if there's something that you find out that's not available, then contact one of us. We'll work with you to get access to it.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got here, can you elaborate more on selecting the problem to create the proposal? Well, here's where I would start. Number one, reflect on organizations in general and situations that either need improvement or maybe they're problematic already. Read the articles that are in the area of your discipline, and maybe talk to other individuals that are perhaps in similar situations to you. Depending upon your contacts, a number of people have contacted their professors from their master's program. If you have an idea and you want to pass it by one of us in an area, our professors will be glad to, you know, to bounce ideas around with you. But yeah, that's the process. It really needs to be something, though, that you have either over the years or more recently developed an interest in, and you want to explore further. All right. Okay, all of the research proposals are quantitative in design. If you want to propose a qualitative, then please pass it by me ahead of time so that either I or one of the other professors that is knowledgeable about your particular area can provide you with the input. You know, everybody's busy. The last thing I want you to do is to write an 18-page paper that's not on target. So, you know, if there's a question and it's not the 50th question you ask, but if there's a question that you have in this journey, then, you know, you need to call upon either myself or or I might refer you to another individual who's more qualified than me to ensure that the work that you do in writing this proposal is in fact productive. By the way, in terms of research design, almost all the work we do is a combination of both qualitative and quantitative, but the emphasis is on the quantitative aspects of the design as opposed to the qualitative. The program itself is what we refer to as mixed methods. Mixed methods, which is a combination of both qualitative and quantitative, but with a heavy emphasis on the quantitative side. All right, well, must have done a pretty good job answering questions because we don't have, but I'm sure that you're going to have additional questions later on. So you know how to get in touch with us. We've enjoyed having an opportunity to share with you. You may want to go back and in fact rely upon the resources again. But I will make sure that this PowerPoint is on the file. Thanks for giving us your time today.
Thank you, Dr. Hare.
It's nice to see some faces that I've interacted with. I hope to see you again.
Dr. Pennywell, you will as well. I've talked to you before. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Take care.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hare.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Hare.
You're welcome. We have fun too, by the way.
There we go.
Okay, in this.